we'll keep it as interesting as we can for you. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to be here. My name's Story Reed, and I'm an assistant director with the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries. I'm going to moderate this great panel we have today on aquaculture and fisheries. It's already been a great afternoon. I really enjoyed the lunch talks, so we'll try to keep it going. In my job with DMF, as assistant director, I oversee things like our commercial permit program, our fisheries statistics program, even seafood marketing, and some of our state waters fisheries policy. So when I was thinking about how to introduce aquaculture and fisheries in Massachusetts, for me, that kind of goes to numbers because that's my background. It's pretty interesting when you look at the value of seafood in Massachusetts in particular, let alone Plymouth. But in 2022, the ex-vessel value of seafood landed in Massachusetts was $668 million. So that's just the price the first dealer pays to the fisherman. And then, for economic multipliers beyond that, usually we use an average of about 3. So it's, almost $2 billion worth of economic activity from the seafood industry in Massachusetts. And then if you drill down, that's driven by the sea scallop fishery, landings in New Bedford. It makes New Bedford consistently the top valued port in the nation because of the value of sea scallops. Second is lobster. And then third, and the most, pretty much the most valuable species landed coming out of state waters only is the eastern oyster. So, and most of that's aquaculture. So it's the number 3 species in the state now in terms of value. And there's Chrissy Pettypass, our aquaculture specialist and shellfish program leader. So if you have any questions, she can help too. We've also got our commissioner, Tom O'Shea from the Department of Fish and Game. So thank you both for coming in. And then the other, to finish the story of aquaculture and the oyster in terms of the numbers, 10 years ago, the ex-vessel value of oysters was about a third. It was about $10 million, and now it's up to 30. And if you kind of dig deeper, we have about 400 permitted shellfish propagation permit holders. And 10 years ago, that was about 350. So there's expansion in the number of people and the number of aquaculture sites in the state. But there's more than that. The industry has grown because of demand, increased production on the grants that we have. So you can't just trace, it's not just a linear relationship between the number of grants or the acreage and the value in production. There's more going on than that. There's increased production, there's more demand. And Chrissy and I were talking at lunch about all the other nuances of the industry and how certain areas of the state, because of the techniques they use, are more productive year-round, et cetera. So it's an interesting story. And it'll be really interesting to have this panel today talk about innovation, technology, and strategies going forward for the state and regionally. And here's our aquaculture specialist, Gabe Lundgren, that just walked in, so that's great. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, and we're going to have a brief presentation by them for each of them, and then we'll open it up to some questions. So let's, there's not many of us, so we can make this a bit of a conversation. So that's what we hope to do. And even though you don't hear us coming out of the speaker, we're going to use the microphone for the recording, so we might repeat questions and things like that. But first up of our panelists is going to be Chip Terry, the founder and CEO of Blue Trace. Chip has over 20 years of experience in helping companies small and large navigate a world being changed by new technologies. At Blue Trace, Chip and his team are developing a mobile, easy-to-use, automated traceability system for the growing shellfish farming community. And it's so easy to use, he just showed it to me in about 2 minutes, and it's really awesome. So I'm going to hand it over to Chip and get his slides up.
All right, thank you. Do you want me to stand over there and do this, or are you going to drive? Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Great to be here. I have not spent much time in Plymouth, so I know very little about Plymouth. But oh, look at that. Okay, so when you start a company, so my background, just to give you a little bit of who I am, I grew up on the coast of Maine, pretty far down east, with a lot of lobstermen. Castine, up on Penobscot Bay. Ah, all right. Maine Maritime Academy. So, but I moved to Boston for college. I stayed here and got involved in the tech industry, did a whole bunch of different things in different aspects of the tech industry. But I always had this pull back to Maine. My stepfather was a professor at the Maine Maritime Academy, and I had a bunch of friends who had started oyster farms. So the last company sold off. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up, which my kids are now in college, so I still haven't made it. And I had this friend who started this oyster farm. He was like, you should come become a partner in my oyster farm. And so I looked at it, and for various reasons, among others, I don't think he ever paid taxes. I said, I'm not buying into your oyster farm, but I love the industry that you're in. This is such a cool thing. I mean, there's very few industries, particularly in rural Maine, but in pretty much every coastal place, where it's great for the environment, it's great for the community, and it's great for your health. And so, this is an industry that's so interesting to be involved in. But you also began to realize that it can be fairly complicated, that these are a lot of small businesses, 400 in Massachusetts, that are running, very fast, trying to do a lot of things. They're wearing all the hats, they're driving the truck, they're buying the seed, they're flipping the bags, they're trying to stay up with regulations. They just got a lot of different things going on. And so we, working with my friends who had started farms, really a pet project, not as the thinking as a business, said, I bet we can help you. And I bet we can help you in a bunch of different ways. And so we sort of set as our mission to help safe, because one of the challenges with seafood is that it does have way too many food safety issues. So how do we help it be a safe food, affordable? Also a problem with seafood is sometimes it gets, way too fancy. And so how do we make this something that is approachable? And we want it delivered through a frictionless digital system. If you ever go to a seafood operation, I have a office on the Boston Fish Pier now, and I watch these guys handwriting checks and mailing them to somebody. I watch them putting on a handwritten log and then retyping the information into the state system so that they can have their records. It's brutal, and it's not particularly efficient. Because this is what happens when you have all this sort of paperwork. If you get sick from eating a bad oyster tomorrow, fortunately it happens very infrequently, don't get nervous, 50% of the time they're not going to be able to figure out where it came from because some failure somewhere along the line. Very often, by the way, it's right at the restaurant level, but it can be elsewhere. It's time consuming. This is record keeping from the largest shellfish operation in California. And that's how they're keeping track of everything, and that's not unusual. And this is the largest seafood distributor in Philadelphia, and it is literally crayon on wet wax boxes. And also, again, not unusual. And so this creates huge problems in this industry. Because this is what might happen. Comox, British Columbia, beautiful spot out in British Columbia. I have a bunch of clients out there. He has to put a tag on every bag of oysters as it leaves the farm. He has to write a log. The first processor has to do another tag, a bill of lading, a log, on and on and on, just to get it to the restaurant over here. Each of these is a lot of paperwork. And by the way, I picked Comox because Comox had a breakdown in their sewage treatment plant. And they then had a recall. And they tried to trace all this back. And I had a distributor in Philadelphia who had gotten oysters from Comox, British Columbia, from two different distributors. One of them was recalling, the other was not. Because they looked at this and said, one person got the memo that these were recalled, the other didn't. And he was trying to piece them together. It took everybody tons of time. More than 400 people got sick from that one outbreak. But here's the other thing that I've learned in this industry, is that a lot of people have tried to sell traceability. Oh, you know what? Everybody will pay a nickel more at the end of the chain for traceability. That's sort of this myth that everybody's hoping will happen, and it doesn't really happen. But if you sell supply chain improvements, if you sell, we're just going to get rid of redundant paperwork for you, so you don't have to sit on the dock and write 100 tags by hand and it's sub-zero temperatures. we're going to make your business better, save you time, that's what you can sell. And traceability is just built into the system. And then the other question everybody always asks, and you can tell I've been out raising money occasionally, is that, why don't they just take a system from someplace else? And the problem is there are a lot of similarities to produce or meat or chicken or whatnot, but seafood is really unique. I mean, just in Massachusetts, the diversity of product is huge. The length of the supply chain. It is not unusual for even an oyster to go through 6, 7, 8 steps from the time it leaves the farm to the time it ends up at your restaurant.
It's the same with farms. Only one, two.
Yeah.
5 steps.
Yeah. The other thing is 70% of U.S. consumed seafood is being imported. It would be great to be able to change that metric. In some ways, this is an awful thing for our global environment because the regulations in the U.S. are tighter, so more people go overseas, it's cheaper, et cetera. It would be great to be able to see this something. You have fairly inconsistent suppliers. They are small, they tend to come and go. There's a lot of transformation, and 80% of seafood is consumed in restaurants. So it tends to not go through grocery stores, which tend to be a funneling point. And this is what it looks like in the wild. This happens to be the Fulton Street Fish Market. Have anybody ever been to the Fulton Street Fish Market? Anybody know it's not at Fulton Street? It's at Hunts Point in the Bronx. It opens at midnight. It closes at 8 a.m. It's the second largest fish market in the world. These are guys who are all living there in the middle of the night. This is, what happens in the real world of seafood transportation and sort of the distribution system. So we launched this about 4 years ago. Today, actually, we've now tipped over, since I wrote these slides, we're now over 400 clients. Every coastal state in the US, every coastal province in Canada. And as of last week, we had 3.3 million tags printed. And you can think of each one of these tags, this is a shellfish tag, each one of these tags will have, is essentially a record in a database that has all the data about the harvest, the location, the time, the quantity, and not on the tag, but associated with it is temperature and other culture. That's a QR code. And that QR code links straight to that database record, so you can add things as it goes into distribution. That's what we do. Thank you. I've got much more information here, but I'll stop.
So I have a question. You can. So we're going to questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't we do questions on the presentation?
So I'm an entrepreneur. I work in food processing. I'm working in the green and blue economies right now. One of the things we saw a lot happening in the farming domain, you mentioned it briefly. Everything's done by paper. You see on the seafood side. Same on the farming side. Accounting, most of it's on cash versus accrual, right? So there's a lot of that paper, there's cash going on. And so in evaluating how green farmers are going vertical, extending their season, they're looking at these cloud-based software for farm management. Is that what you're talking about here? Not just, are you showing me how to, the whole supply chain piece or the farm piece? I'm trying to understand the whole.
So we're doing just the supply chain right now.
Okay.
We actually started with farm management and realized that was a much more. So the question was, are we doing farm management or supply chain? And we decided to focus on one thing and do it well. And by the way, I didn't mention, but this is what a printer looks like. It's a Bluetooth from your phone. Most of this gets managed out of your phone.
Yeah, so your supply chain is probably the bigger challenge, at least between the pieces.
It's between the pieces. Like there's all that connectivity. But you're right. Everybody has this paper challenge.
Well, the cold chain.
Yeah.
I mean, right from coming out of the water for
Yeah.
seafood, you got a cold chain issue, you got a tag right from to the end.
Yeah. Other questions? All right.
Let me get the next presentation up here. Okay, next we're going to have, let's see, here we go. Next we're going to have Matt Thompson. Matt Thompson is the Aquaculture Programs Manager at the New England Aquarium. Matt has been with the New England Aquarium since 2007, focusing on improving aquaculture operations and environmentally responsible seafood sourcing strategies. Here you go, man.
Okay, I am traditionally very quiet, so if you can hear me at the back, wave. Oh, good, good, good. And I probably deafened everybody on the microphone, but there we go. Yes, so, yeah, as you said, thank you for that story. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I hope everyone here is familiar with the fact that New England Aquarium has, in fact, an aquarium and some amazing exhibits you can go and see. But you might be a little bit surprised to learn that we think of ourselves as a global ocean conservation organization, and that we see a really significant role for ourselves and opportunities in reducing the human impact on the oceans and preserving ocean health. We do this through educating people as they come through our front doors. We work with major industry, we work with policymakers, and we have a really extensive research arm. The aquarium has a group called the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life, which has about 50 scientists working on a whole range of issues and ways that we can reduce those impacts. I work for a teeny sliver of that. I work for the Balanced Blue Lab. Basically, our mission is the same. We're still trying to reduce these impacts, but we do it through working with private sector partners and market-based solutions. And we've advised major seafood companies in the US for 20-odd years. We've worked on offshore aquaculture policy in the US. We work with all the major certification chains to improve their standards for things like farm shrimp, salmon, you name it. So we divide ourselves into these sort of 3 I's, these pillars of what we want to work with. And in the blue technology space, we want to work with innovators. So we're helping create and mentor new blue technology startups that have technology that benefits the ocean from a whole variety of aspects. Although I work in fisheries and aquaculture, and our team does, we have groups that work on offshore wind, all sorts of aspects in shipping and other components, and blue carbon as well. We work with industry, as I said. We partner with major seafood buyers. We advise them on better ways to buy and sell their seafood, how they can leverage improvements in their supply chain, and work around policy at state level as well as national. And we work with investors. The idea here is to try to improve confidence in investors in understanding what the blue economy is, and then hopefully that leads to them putting more money into said blue economy. We don't do this alone. We work with Searhead. They're also based in Boston, in Massachusetts. They're an early stage startup platform. They have a Blue Angels investor group. Usually when we define our work, I mean, it's not as black and white as this, but they provide a lot of business mentoring and networks, and we provide a lot of conservation sites and networks throughout the industries. We have 2 major programs working with Searhead right now. The first is Blue Swell. That's an early stage startup incubator that began in 2020. It covers a 20-week mentoring course that covers all aspects of business development, understanding conservation impacts, how you measure those, how you communicate to customers and to investors in an appropriate and clear way. And it also includes a cash stipend for that involvement. In 2022, we launched the Upswell program. That's aimed at increasing angel investment in blue technology. We aim to do that through education and awareness, through things like white papers, e-learning modules, and events. So we're in our 4th cohort of Blue Swell right now. These are the companies. This is sort of a snapshot of those that have been related to fisheries and aquaculture, not all of them. But you might recognize some of these names. So Aqua is the seaweed, amongst other things, burger company. Mabel Systems creates traceability and information systems for seafood processors. Radmantis is an AI-developed tool to reduce stress through fish handling and early disease detection. Organicin Scientific is a drug discovery platform working in aquaculture, trying to identify alternatives to antibiotic use. At the moment, they're trying, their first drug can treat Vibrio in shrimp, which is a $1 billion a year problem. So hopefully they're going to be growing nicely. Aquatic Labs, they create sensors for all sorts of things, including aquaculture. And Marinas Bio, they're part of our 4th cohort. They're creating cell-cultured caviar, so an alternative to supplement the caviar industry through cell culture. In our upswell space, we've got, we're going to be publishing a series of 4 white papers and education modules. Our first is entitled Aquafeed Innovation Investment Opportunities for Responsible Aquaculture. So aquafeed is a $70 billion a year industry, and it has a lot of special areas that could be useful for blue technology. So in the background to producing this report, we did an intensive literature review. We spoke to over 15 experts in the global feed industry, and we identified these 4 focus areas. So the first being responsible feed ingredients. So the global supplies of marine ingredients, fish meal and fish oil, are just globally limited and all spoken for. Same with long-chain fatty acids like DHA and EPA. So this is focused on things that will supplement that supply chain and then do it with a way that has sort of similar or better environmental footprint than those traditional marine ingredients. Functional feed ingredients are things that have a really good basic nutrition value, but they give you a little bit of magic extra. That could be enhancing growth rates, it could be reducing stress on the animals and the environment, it could be improving disease resistance, anything that gets that animal to market quicker and more efficiently. Basically, we'd call a functional feed ingredient. That also covers things that improve product quality, so reducing off flavors or increasing the DHA, EPA levels in the final product. Enabling technologies tend to be hardware and software plays. They tend to be at the farm level, trying to improve the efficiency of feed use at the farm, which also has the benefit of reducing the amount of waste to the marine environment, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and that's about 50% of most fed aquaculture costs come from feed. So a lot of advantage there. And we also wanted to get some future applications. So we wanted to attract people to where the key challenges are in aquaculture and say, these are the core pain points. If you've got a feed play that makes any kind of impact on that, that's a pretty exciting place to delve into. Things like sea lice in Atlantic salmon is one of those. So just to summarize our role, we identify, mentor, and accelerate startups with positive ocean benefits, including those in fisheries and aquaculture. We help them identify the most impactful markets from an environmental and economic basis. We help them connect with our global network of industry leaders to identify where their marketplace is and what they can sell to. We help them develop effective communication and evaluation of their ocean impacts. And we hope to drive new investment into the sector through educating angel investors. So, thank you.
Great. Any questions for Matt on his presentation? All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Rob. Rob McGurran is the CTO and co-founder of Blue IQ. Rob is an experienced technical leader in all phases of applied research and development programs, from prototype to production. At Blue IQ, Rob is working to create a dual-use passive acoustic sensor technology to prevent whale strikes, mitigate wind farm noise on marine life, and safeguard port security. So I'm going to pass it to you, Rob, and get your presentation up.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'll grab that. Great. How's everybody doing? So I'm Ron McGurn. I'm from Blue IQ, actually here with my business partner, Kim Gavin. She's our CEO. She was in the room. I'm sure she'll be back. And what we're doing is we've created what we're calling a software-defined hydrophone, and we're using that to safeguard biodiversity. There we go. So the company, even though we just started back in March, we've been around for about 6 months. We actually, the idea for the company, the seeds for the idea were planted about a year ago. We were at Hampton, Oceans 2022 in Hampton, and we saw the film The Sonic Sea, and it talked about, Sonic Sea. Oh, really? Oh, cool. And so we were really just very moved by that movie and thought, oh my God, with all the noise pollution effects on the whales, how do we do something about this? Well, it turns out that Kim and I have a lot of different specialties and expertise from a lot of different areas, including low sensor power, acoustics, satellite imaging, and underwater sensor development, and low power, low cost electronics. We're like, wow, I think we could really do something here. So that's kind of how we got our start. We officially formed in March, and we've been rolling ever since. So not only were we interested in figuring out how could we use acoustic sensors to mitigate underwater noise pollution, turns out there's a lot of different problems that you can solve using passive acoustics. Now, passive acoustics has been around forever. Our innovation in this area is all about making it very small, making it low power, and being able to run machine learning at the edge. And with those sort of capabilities, we're able to go after a number of different problem areas. You know, for example, being able to detect marine mammals for various applications, both for noise mitigation, but also to try to prevent and reduce vessel strikes. Port and harbor security, we can use our machine learning algorithms and advanced signal processing to be able to detect man-made vehicles and objects that shouldn't be there. Illegal, unauthorized, unreported fishing in fisheries. We could be a persistent, autonomous acoustic sensor that when we hear something that sounds like fishing vessel or fishing activity, we can cue a satellite to scan and take pictures to look for vessels. So really the key really is we've got this technology. What its function is depends on the software load that you put on our sensor, and making it easy to quickly develop new applications, new signal processing and machine learning applications using our tools that you can quickly, rapidly prototype new applications and deploy them. So that's a quick picture of our prototype. If you get a chance, we're actually demonstrating upstairs in the hall. We're running our North Atlantic right whale machine learning classifier demonstration. We're doing that in real time. Our prototype is very low power. It's about 100 milliwatts per channel. But the real key thing is that we're able to do machine learning at the edge. So Brett was actually, I was taking wildly quickly notes. I'm like, man, I like his presentation. I'm going to use some of his material for our presentation. But really the ability to, not just be a data recorder, but actually, record that data, but process at the edge in real time to create actionable real-time alerts that we can then send to the platform that we're integrated with. Really, the key takeaway for our technology, it's small, it's low power, machine learning at the edge. Here's sort of a concept of operations. Oh, I forgot one major point. Excuse me. We're so low power that we can go on vehicles and platforms that typically can't support state-of-the-art passive acoustic technology. So what we're really targeting is power-constrained platforms and small UUVs. So a concept of operation might be something like here in a fisheries concept of operation, where you have a number of our sensors, our open ears. In this figure, I'm showing a 4-channel configuration, but we can integrate with a system like SOFAR spotter buoy. That allows us that gives us power, and that also gives us real-time communications over satellite. So we can send real-time detection, classification, and other acoustic event information back up into the cloud. In this case, in this application, we could have running on our open ear a software application that could be both real-time fish tagging tracking, so we can decode the fish tags in real time, but also do acoustic recording. Something today you have to buy 2 separate pieces of equipment in order to do that, but also it's very expensive to go out and deploy that on buoys. Our system makes that pretty straightforward. We're partnering with SOFAR. They initially, when they were looking, they wanted to add passive acoustic monitoring to their buoys. They did their own search. They couldn't find anything commercially available that would fit the power consumption constraints that they had, and that's why they sought us out. We sought each other out, and we've formed a strong partnership. So we'll initially be deploying our open ear sensors on the SOFAR spotter buoys. So we've got sorry, excuse me. Woo, getting ahead of myself. We have a product roadmap. We started with our prototype. We did our testing in a tank, an artificial ocean, which we were able to simulate acoustic noise and background noise in a fish tank. That was quite an interesting undertaking. We then moved to take our prototype and we actually put it into SOFAR Spotter's integration kit. We integrated our hydrophone and electronics right into their integration kit. So using their smart mooring system, we can go out and deploy the spotter buoys and give them the capability to do passive acoustic monitoring. But where we're really headed in the future is increasing the number of channels from 1 channel to 4. The electronics that we have right now can support up to 4 channels. And then further down the road, we're looking at developing smart acoustic arrays where we can do distributed sensing across individual sensors, but also very much reduce the power consumption and cost of the sensor. So just a quick competitive analysis, kind of where do we stand with, compared against other technologies. We're not a data recorder, but we can do data recording. We're not a fish tag tracking system, but we can track fish tags. We provide real-time DSP, machine learning at the edge, and very low power consumption. We're about more than a tenth compared to what current state-of-the-art capabilities exist for the same functionality. And so we're really all about power reduction, data reduction by doing processing at the edge and providing actionable data in real time. So I mentioned Kim. Kim's our CEO. We've been working for a number of years together. Both of us have a lot of experience working for doing a lot of federal agency research and development. I spent some time in a number of different startups as well. So we've got a lot of experience both as entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs starting new sort of projects and new projects and new opportunities within large companies as well. Few accomplishments to date. We've been lucky enough to participate in a number of different incubator programs, including the Gulf of Maine Research Institute's Blue Tech Boost. Most recently, we just finished and graduated from the Clean Tech Open, and then we're also participating in the Mass Challenge and the Mass Challenge Blue Tech cohort as well. So kind of where we are right now, a few milestones that are coming up. We'll be out in San Francisco at SOFAR Ocean's BristleCon, which is which will be unveiling and demonstrating our completely integrated acoustic passive sensor with the spotter buoy using Bristlemouth, which is an open standard plug-and-play underwater sensor communication protocol that they developed. We'll be demonstrating that in November. We'll be hopefully very soon, by the end of the year, demonstrating our capabilities in MITRE's ocean tank and as part of MITRE's Blue Tech Lab. And then early next year, we'll be starting our pilot program. So we're looking to put some of these sensors into action. It's a little bit different from that ask, but kind of winging it up here a little bit. Yeah, I think that's it. Any questions? Yes, please.
So you mentioned your classifier. In training your classifier, is it to discriminate like whale sounds from boat sounds? Are you actually getting to such fine detail that you think you can discriminate between species-specific whale sounds, like right whale versus a humpback whale?
Yeah, my educated guess answer is yes. I think we can do that. I think more importantly, we're set up to work with partners and customers to be able to take data from them and train models, and then optimize those models to run on our hardware. The North Atlantic right whale data that we trained and test on was all data provided by NOAA. But I think partnering with the right people, getting access to certain data that we have it's more about the process we have. I think, to optimize the models, and then using our expertise in machine learning and training to work with the customer to get those models running. So that was a long answer, but I think it's all about the data, getting access to data, and working with our customers and partners to build those models for them, training on their their own data and optimizing models, and feature vectors really is the more important thing. Sorry.
And so that's how, so if you have those models, this is how you're keeping it on the edge, right? So long as you got it, you'll keep a little database on the edge, right? You get your processing sort of like.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so we can compress the model that you may run in the cloud, for example,
that's what I was concerned, yeah.
tens of kilobytes, and run that on the embedded processor. Yeah. So cool. Anybody else? No, I think we're good. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rob, Matt, Chip. That was great. We just heard a lot about innovation and technology and how all of it can come together to help fisheries and aquaculture. So we wanted to, hear some questions from you all. We have some questions that we've come up with, to get the panel talking a little bit about how all this works together. So, feel free if you've got a question, raise your hand.
Back to Chip for a minute. So can you talk about costs specifically related to, an oyster farmer and how that would work?
Yeah, so the question is about cost and related to aquaculture. So for a basic farm who wants to just print tags, printer's $500, and we charge you for paper, and about the same amount you'd pay for paper. So there's no monthly fee or whatnot, and so that's the sort of starting is about $500, and then it scales up as you get to bigger distributors. You have more features and whatnot. But we wanted to make it very accessible and easy for that small farmer to use.
Can you able to bulk print tags? Or
Yep, I can print off. The roll in this little printer here holds 100 tags, so I can go ahead and print 100 tags. If I print 200, I just have to switch the roll out in the middle. And they're what's called thermal printing, so it's waterproof. It doesn't use ink. It's just special paper.
You have a hole punch or a way to attach it to the oyster bags?
We do. So we have a little hole punch at the top. So the question is, do we have a hole punch? Yes, we have a hole punch at the top.
Sorry, one more question. I was an oyster farmer for like 4 years. This is interesting. Say that it gets scanned in by the truck that is
Yeah.
waiting with ice when you bring them in, right?
Yeah.
What about the liability of, it gets traced back that somebody was sick from an oyster that you farmed, but there's really no way of knowing where maybe a mistake occurred, like.
Yeah. I mean, the liability is as good often as the records you have. So if you have good records that I followed all the rules, it's time and temperature, and I have really clear records of that, your liability risk goes down dramatically. The folks who run into trouble are the folks who write everything on the back of a piece of paper, and they lost the piece of paper, and they say, of course we did everything right. And they're the people who end up in troubles. And then there are weird, for those of you who want way too much detail on seafood or shellfish regulations, there's a thing called a model ordinance that the FDA does through the NSSP that creates a model regulation for every state. Every state adopts it and then changes it a little bit. And so we basically built a rules engine behind the scenes for each state so that, if you're farming in California, you have to tell everybody that causes cancer in California. If you're farming in Washington State, you have to record the water temperature. And there's just different things you have to do in different places.
So we heard from the fisherman, I'm a food processor. Would we both have to have licenses to the platform in order to be able to carry the tag down the line?
Not really. We have a lot of distributors who pick it up in the middle and just they can scan a tag, an existing
So it's
tag.
the originating farm that's trying to cover their bud.
Yeah.
That they're the one, and you will maintain that path for them.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've heard that it's challenging to verify the beginning source of the oyster. So how do we get to that piece of it?
I mean, there can be fraud in any system. And if somebody wants to switch it out, and you do see this a lot at restaurants, I get farmers who tell me all the time, I haven't harvested in a month, and I've seen my oysters on the menu at the local restaurant. That happens. I mean, I think the way you ultimately get there is some sort of DNA testing or something, but that's cost prohibitive.
Blast freeze it all.
Yeah.
Let somebody go.
Yeah. But you're beginning to see that in higher value species. So things like tuna. Like we actually have started now tagging tuna as well. And there you're starting to see people say, oh, wait, I need to actually track this all the way through. Yeah. Go to blue-trace.com. Yeah. Questions for New England Aquarium?
Any questions for the panel? We've got some. We can, all right, I'll ask one to kind of keep us going, I think along kind of the same track is that innovation, technology, tackling issues with the industry. What problems are limiting the fisheries and aquaculture industry, and can these problems be solved with some of these technological advancements that we've heard about today? Rob?
Yeah, that's all right. Just warning, controversial topics coming up. So, so you all heard of the North Atlantic right whale, right? There's only 340 left. The situation is pretty dire, right? So, I mean, NOAA's gone on the record of saying the best way to kind of, how do you keep more of the North Atlantic right whales from dying? How do you prevent this? Well, one way is to have a blanket speed limit. You know, certain times of the year, 10 knots, certain times of the year. And that's really tough for the fishing industry, right? So one of the things that we're hoping is that, and they've even said, they've gone on the record at saying, is we just don't have the technology to do real-time tracking and classification of North Atlantic right whale at the level we need to, not to have these speed limits imposed. So we're hoping that, you know, we kind of see conservation and development really need to go hand in hand. And part of the inspiration for this technology is to be able to do that. Like, if you could, you know, I mean, the vision is to have thousands of, you know, our sensors up and down the East Coast being able to track these whales, so that you could relay that real-time information to give updated locations, so the boats could know when and where exactly do they have to watch their speed. And so that's what's really driven our focus on persistence and autonomous. The machine learning part, but super low power. So you could put these on as many low powered vehicles, as many low powered buoys as possible. So
then you could have dynamic closures.
Exactly.
Instead of a blanket closure.
Instead of a blanket closure. Yeah.
Or speed limit.
Yeah, I think anything that can be done to help the fishing industry is really important. I mean, it's a tough, everybody knows it's a tough business.
And shipping as well.
And shipping as well. I mean, that's a whole other, you know, reducing vessel strikes. If you had the ability to, you know, put these on drifters out in the shipping lanes, so that could give real-time messages, you know, to the shipping industry, that they could slow their roll too. That might help quite a bit. So, but thank you.
Any other examples or anything either you want to mention there?
I mean, you know, there are a lot of barriers to the growth of the aquaculture industry. You know, if you particularly focus on shellfish, it's sighting. You know, everybody deals with sighting issues. It doesn't matter what state or province you're in. You're dealing with issues of your neighbors don't necessarily want you there. You're something new. It's different. You know, the most successful ones are the folks who show up and, you know, first of all, try to become part of the community to start with, but also, you know, show them how this is not going to destroy their view. In fact, it's going to make it good, and they have, you know, free oysters that show up and whatnot. I think another issue, though, for the growth of the aquaculture industry, or the growth of the seafood industry in general, is a whole education campaign around, you know, why this is good for you, why this is good for the environment. By the way, did you know that of all the protein available, aquaculture, farm shellfish, is the lowest carbon input of any protein source out there? I mean, it's lower than eggs. It's lower than you know, beans, I think. And so it's one of those things that really, you know, there's some education out there that goes a long ways.
Question along those lines. One of so that kind of gets to how to better market for our aquaculture and provide market opportunities. But the communities that are typically eat more seafood than others are often driven not by valuation on the environmental impact, but valuation on how much it costs.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your approaches of how do you address that very big inhibitor on the growth of the seafood market to expand beyond that, the fact that the vast majority of aquaculture products go to the restaurant trade. How do we get it more kind of inland?
Yeah. I mean, various segments have done very well. So if you look at salmon, 20 years ago, salmon was sort of a, once in a while thing, and now it's become a staple. You can get it at, I used to work with Kroger supermarkets. You can get salmon in every Kroger supermarket in the country any day of the week. And that's an aquaculture success story. And they've driven down the cost of that over time. But what, the challenge is that driving down cost often means automation, it means scale. It's a bunch of things that people don't necessarily want in their backyards. Matt and I were just up in St. John, New Brunswick, looking at one of the largest aquaculture operations up there. And it's this massive warehouse of like fish coming in one side and fillets and portions coming out the other side. And it's amazing. And it, from harvesting the fish to, being on a truck going to your local supermarket is measured in minutes. But that's the kind of scale that you begin to look at on some of these things.
Well, to the point in your presentation where there's all these other people doing the work.
Yeah.
So there's only one guy doing the work. Now, they're not doing handoffs. Now you're cutting a lot of the costs down.
Exactly.
The product at the other end. Three vendors.
Exactly. So, you figure out where you can do it. The other piece that we haven't really talked about is loss. There's a lot of loss in the system from the very first harvest all the way through. And if you can, the more you can reduce loss, by some estimates, it's 30% of the product that's harvested is lost somewhere in the supply chain. And so if you can reduce that, then you can charge less and still make the same amount.
Yeah, I'll chip in a little bit on that question, just because I think there's sometimes a disconnect between the seafood that we generally eat in America and the seafood that we can produce in large quantities. Number one, shrimp by miles. Atlantic salmon, we're a very small player in a massive industry that's dominated by Norway and Chile. Tilapia, Pangasius, we keep going down and down on this list. We're not going to be able to compete with those countries, I think, on a price point, on a volume perspective. So if we want to think about what we want to encourage people to eat, I think it needs to be linked to things that we can actually farm in the US in a reasonable quantity and at a reasonable price point. And that conversation doesn't seem to be happening very much. We're still focused on let's raise more farm salmon. Well, I think looking for some alternatives, some niche things, seaweed is one of those examples where we've kind of hit the maximum pound that we can actually sell right now. You go to the Northeast Aquaculture Conference and they say, we've got 17 farmers and that's all we can deal with. So I don't know where that comes in. Is it federal policy or somewhere else? But it's one of those components that as we try to think about, we want to grow aquaculture production, we need to think about what we can raise, what people want to eat, and maybe we need to do a little bit of conversion and experience there. I don't know.
Any other questions from the audience? Because that kind of, goes into another question here that we had for the panel. And you just touched on it, but how can creative marketing kind of get at, be utilized to increase the market for aquaculture products or seafood in general? So I don't know if anybody had any other thoughts on creative marketing. You both touched on it. Chip, you want to?
I actually think the oyster industry is a great example for the seafood industry. Oyster is the only part of the seafood industry that really has brands. Like you buy different types of oysters. I buy Chatham oysters. I buy Blue Points. I buy whatever, and you don't see. Otherwise, you just buy salmon. I buy shrimp. Maybe I think about where the origin is, and so beginning to think about some of these branding and whatnot, I think is great for us. One thing we haven't really talked about also is recirculating aquaculture systems, so RAS systems, which will be a really interesting development over time. There's some question of whether they can scale it with their current technology. But there's one down in Miami that's doing hundreds of thousands of pounds of salmon in Miami. And they don't have to be on the seashore. They can be inland. There's a couple up in Maine that are just starting up. And so you begin to see some of these systems and pulling it out of there. And I've seen some shrimp systems as well. So it'll be interesting over time to see if some of these technologies really innovate. You probably see that.
Yeah, I see that. That kind of goes back to problems, but one of the ways that we work with marketing, when you say creative marketing, is around market claims. And I think in the seafood industry right now, there's more and more attention on claims around environmental claims, things like sustainable, and more legal action around that. So, I would just be very careful when we talk about creative marketing, not to get too creative, right? We talk about a golden rule, right? Things have to be truthful. You have to be able to validate them through some sort of independent science or something that says, yes, okay, this is what we say, this is how we back it up. So, yeah, caution on claims in general. Don't get too creative. And then, to RES and other things, there are so many opportunities in aquaculture, nationally, globally, for new technologies to come in. It's a really exciting time, I think, with AI, with machine learning, with underwater cameras, with, IT, Internet of Things, to really find all those pain points, because there's so many in so many of these industries that we could inspire solutions for. And I think the right whale issue is another kind of one. It's kind of interesting to see where we're trying to transition people to on-demand gear, that technology is not far away at all. You can do it right now. It's just a question of scaling it up and reducing costs. And then when that's there, that's something that's transferable, not just from here, but the West Coast and other places. So if you're in blue technology and you want to get into a low-carbon, really healthy food system, this is a great place, a great interaction to have. So I hope some people are inspired to do that.
Thanks. That's good. That was interesting. Chip, you mentioned the example of an oyster farmer saying, "Hey, I saw my oysters, advertised at a restaurant, and I haven't harvested in a month." Is that something that technology like yours could help with? I mean, you didn't talk too much about your software as a marketing tool, but it seems to me it could be, maybe.
So, that QR code on the bottom of our tags leads straight to Meet the Farmer. Learn how they grow this product. Learn the beautiful Cape Cod Bay and how, why this is the best place in the world to grow oysters. By the way, everybody claims that. But yeah, you can do a lot of that. But the other thing is, with big data, you can begin to get at some of these fraud problems in a real way without being too intrusive. So I bought Bunamoto oysters. I bought 50 bags of Bunamoto oysters. Somehow I sold 500 bags of Bunamoto oysters. Well, that's a red flag that you can begin to do with some sort of digital systems. And so you begin to look at some of those fairly obvious things. One of the things we actually are just have a patent pending on is around predictability or predictions for food safety. So, take a very simple example. I put this on the truck at 8 a.m. this morning. It's 100 degrees outside. And the truck should have been a 2-hour drive, but somehow it showed up at the receiving dock 16 hours later in a 100-degree day. That's probably something we should take a look at before anybody eats that. There's some fairly obvious things you could begin to do on some of these food safety, looking at the data once it's in a digital form, that I think can really help what we're doing.
I have a question. I don't know if it's necessarily for the panelists, but I feel like we might have the right people at this conference. Is there a blue economy mutual fund, since a lot of you are talking about investors and marketable products?
There are a lot of venture capital companies that are beginning to look at the blue economy. So they're not really So there's a bunch of companies out there beginning to invest in the blue economy. NICWA and whatnot have done a great job of sort of educating them. I would not say there is a blue economy mutual fund that I've seen, but it is easy to imagine that sort of thing coming. There's also clearly some private equity firms that are looking into this industry and saying, hey, maybe there's something to do here. In some ways, I think that'd be sad if that really happened. But there's definitely a lot more investor interest in this for obvious reasons. It's a huge economy. It's the most traded protein in the world is seafood, 3 times beef. And so there is a lot of energy in this world. And it's the totally hidden industry.
All right, I'm nervous to ask this one, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right. In what ways can government work to encourage aquaculture production? And if you want to broaden that beyond aquaculture, feel free. Local, state, federal. So, any ways maybe the government can help with any of the things that the three of you or any of us have talked about today? Who wants it? Who wants it first?
I mean, the government has an incredibly important role to play. If I look at just shellfish aquaculture, if it rains, things run off our streets and end up in your shellfish. You do not want to eat those shellfish. Just having obvious closures and ways to do that is incredibly important. And so, those are things that, give us confidence in food safety. You could grow just as many oysters in the Philippines for probably a third of the cost, but nobody would want to eat a Filipino oyster unless they had some sort of, way of knowing that it was going to be safe. So those, I think the government plays an incredibly important role in that. In some cases, they've been great at funding things and helping get things off the ground and providing the infrastructure. I mean, fisheries, one of the obvious things is working waterfront. Having a place you can drive a truck up to that has a boom to be able to lift something heavy off a boat into a truck seems really silly, but it's incredibly important. And in most coastal towns, you're starting to lose that as they turn into residential or something else.
Ours is only 600 pounds, if I read all that correctly.
So it's like, that becomes incredibly important as you do this. I mean, the places, the government sometimes goes too far is they take some of these really good ideas and then they say, oh, we need more of this and more of that and data collection of this and data collection of that and all, and then you begin to get people like, wait a second, this is a little too far. And by and large, states are pretty good about that. But, you do see that happening occasionally. The one that's actually been good for my business, but not really good for the industry, is things like California Prop 65. They keep rewriting California Prop 65 so that everything causes cancer, and now including oysters and clams. They changed the language that had to be on everything. So if you even had a tag that was already printed with its stamp that California 65 causes cancer, you have to change it. And if you don't comply, any individual lawyer can just sue you for however much I've had a number of clients on the East Coast who didn't even know their product was going to California, went through a distributor, but their tag was still on it. Somebody bought it and said, I'm going to sue you unless you pay me $10,000. And that happens all the time, these nuisance suits, and they're stuck having to pay these. So you do have some of these things that just come up with sort of poorly written laws.
Okay, different perspective than these sort of things. So what I'd say about this is I think it's not really government as that you really want leading it all together. It needs to be more of a shared effort. I think you want industry to come in and say, hey, this is what we want. You want stakeholders to come in and say, this is what we want. Because at the moment, there is no real vision, I think, for where aquaculture wants to go in anywhere that I have a sense at a national level and maybe not even regionally. Like, do we want a small little cottage industry with a couple of local family farms kicking about? Okay, fine, no problem. If you want to create a Norwegian salmon industry off the coast of New England, well, I think we'll have to chat about that. But those discussions need to happen, right? What is it that we want? Where can we find people who actually think that's acceptable, so we don't get into so many of these issues obtaining permits because people don't want that equipment there, or we don't have the solutions to things like protected species interactions at that site. Those are the challenges I think that government could look at, like get everybody together, figure out where we want to go, identify where the pain points are, and ensure that there's funding available to mitigate those. And then, of course, we need an offshore aquaculture policy, which is another ongoing issue that the aquarium's been involved in about 4 or 5 years. We keep trying to get these groups to encourage balance between what industry needs and what conservation needs. And we get further and further along from that, but the Aqua Act, I don't know if you've been following that, it improved, and now it's stagnated, and it's stopped moving forwards. So for the last 2 or 3 times, the same Aqua Act's been put together. So there needs to be more effort, I think, to again, find where those common grounds are and then compromise a little and make sure that we have the funding to address the right challenges. We know where we want to go as a whole group. We can reduce NIMBYism by having a conversation about what it is people want and where things are acceptable. and we can have the tools in place to mitigate those environmental risks that at the moment are stopping us moving forwards.
Third perspective?
Yeah, sure. So one thing about Blue IQ that it's a little different is that we're a dual-use technology, meaning that we're developing technology that can be used for both environmental applications, but also for safety and security. So we've really had the benefit through working with the state and a lot of different state agencies, getting access to things like, I'm thinking about like some of the tech bridges, like the Naval Tech Bridge, and getting access to like Newark through programs like Mass Challenge, and getting access to like MITRE's Blue Lab, being able to test our equipment in MITRE's Blue Lab. So there's a lot of great opportunities to engage with government and their funding opportunities, but just a great community. So more of that. Right on, yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. Great. Well, I was given the signal. I think our time's up. So I want to thank the panelists. I thought this was really good with different perspectives, and thank you all for coming.